Interaction design. Interaction design is changing, adapting to new scopes of complexity that demand extensive problem framing, that demand the design of friction to challenge the status quo, that demand us to embrace the uncertainty of complexity. These changes create tensions between what designing was and what designing is becoming. Design education is where we learn to relate to these tensions, where we learn what designing is, where we form the design practices that give shape to the interaction design of the future. This is why I believe design education, our design program, needs to be critically reflected upon. Because if within our program we take the changes in the interaction design field for granted, we will only form practices that reinforce what interaction design used to be. Hi, I am Romy, and in my thesis I have taken a critical stance towards what we take for granted in interaction design, and specifically the interaction design educational program in this university. I, for example, designed these cards through which I challenged interaction design students and staff to critically reflect on our education. I then exhibited what I had found in a space where I invited everyone involved in the interaction design program to physically experience shedding light on what they might be taking for granted. Interestingly, the reflections on these activities pointed to something more foundational, to how our design program teaches us to relate to shifting interaction design foundations, to how interaction design is changing. This is why I designed an activity to discuss these changes. Through an embodied experience facilitated by an artifact, I allowed my fellow interaction design students to deeply reflect on the tension between established problem solving and emergent problem framing approaches in our education. Through my work, I learned a lot about what it takes to make what is underlying our design program visible and conversational. I synthesized my learnings into guidelines to help fellow designers acknowledge and talk about what is taken for granted. Because I believe we cannot take what interaction designing is for granted. Now, if this got you curious, please feel free to come visit me in the IxD exhibition later. Thank you.